And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosie O'Brien-Wojtek, and I'm the Assistant Executive Director at the Connecticut Association of Schools. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to a special presentation on the updated 2021 release of one of NAESP's most popular books from the Leading Learning Communities series, A Principal's Guide to Early Learning and the Early Grades, Pre-K through Grade 3. With the revision of this guide, NAESP continues to uphold its important work in pre-K through grade 3 education. NAESP, in partnership with the National P3 Center at the University of Colorado in Denver, brought together educational leaders and experts in the field of early childhood education to develop and update this comprehensive guide, emphasizing an aligned, cohesive, and robust pre-K through grade 3 system. The primary focus of the guide is to support all children and their learning needs. We at CAS are very excited to host this early childhood webinar today because CAS is an affiliate organization with the National Association of Elementary School Principals. We greatly appreciate our partnership with NAESP. If you're not familiar with the work of NAESP and or a member, I would like to take just a minute to share with you why I've been a member of NAESP for over 20 years, as well as why, if you aren't a member, you should seriously consider joining the association. Founded in 1921, NAESP is a professional organization serving elementary and middle school principals and other educational leaders throughout the United States, Canada, and overseas. NAESP supports school leaders by advocating for a well-rounded and complete education for all students. That includes access to high-quality early learning, arts integration, and after-school and summer learning programs, just to name a few. NAESP strengthens the principal pipeline through mentor training and support for early career principals, assistant principals, and aspiring principals. There are numerous resources for NAESP members, including books, webinars, podcasts, the Principals Magazine, and especially legal benefits. Likewise, there are many opportunities to be connected and network with other administrators at regional and national conferences, on social media, and while attending academies, professional learning opportunities, and other special NAESP events. And best of all, NAESP provides recognition and celebrations to spotlight exemplary principals, outstanding teachers, high-achieving students, and excellent elementary and middle-level schools, including Blue Ribbon schools and Distinguished Service Awards. This is just a quick snapshot of the benefits of being a member of NAESP. So if you aren't already a member, be sure to check out the website at www.naesp.org or contact us at me, especially at CAS, and I will be happy to answer any of your questions. In addition, if you do not have a copy of this book, you can purchase a copy on either the NAESP website or on Amazon. At the end of this webinar, NAESP has graciously donated 3 copies of the Leading Learning Communities, A Principal's Guide to Early Learning and the Early Grades book, and we will be drawing 3 winners to receive a complimentary copy of the book. I'd like to thank NAESP for your generosity and to encourage everyone attending this webinar to stick around to see if you're going to be a lucky winner. Before we get started, however, I just have a couple of quick reminders. Everyone has been muted during this webinar, so please share any questions that you have in the Q&A, and we will try to answer them during this webinar. You may also use the chat feature to let us know if you have any technical issues or to share comments with the members of the panel and other attendees. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the CAS, OEC, and CSDE websites. We encourage you to share this webinar with your colleagues, faculty, and staff once it's posted on the website. Again, I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today for this webinar. It's now my pleasure to introduce one of my colleagues and friends, and certainly one of the leading advocates and voices across Connecticut for high quality, developmentally appropriate, effective, and successful early childhood education for all pre-K through grade 3 children. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Andrea Brunell, Education Consultant at the Connecticut State Department of Education.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to introduce our speakers and our Connecticut team. As Rosie said, I'm Dr. Andrea Brunell. I'm the 619 Part B Coordinator and Early Childhood Specialist at the Connecticut State Department of Education. Joining us as part of our Connecticut team, you've met Dr. Rosie O'Brien-Wojtek, the Assistant Executive Director at the Connecticut Association of Schools. Also joining us is Irene Parisi, Chief Academic Officer at the Connecticut State Department of Education, Dr. Michelle Levy from the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood, and Dr. Karen List, who is the Director of the UConn Pre-K3 Leadership Program. And I am very proud to introduce our main speakers for today, Dr. Gracie Branch, who serves as the Associate Executive Director for Professional Learning at the National Association of Elementary School Principals. In her current position, Dr. Branch works with principals to promote leadership development and mentor public school administrators. Her undergraduate degree is in early childhood education, and in 2011, she earned her PhD from the University of Oklahoma in educational administration, curriculum, and supervision, where she was named a David L. Clark Scholar. In 2016, University Council for Educational Administration recognized Dr. Branch for her excellence in educational leadership. We also have a special guest with us that's no stranger to Connecticut, Dr. Kristie Kauerz, who is an associate clinical professor at the University of Colorado's Denver School of Education and Human Development. Kristie specializes in education reform efforts that address the continuum of learning from birth through third grade, integrating early care and education system building and pre-K to 12 reforms. Her expertise spans policy, research, and practice. Her P3 work is anchored in collaborations with school districts, state agencies, and early learning stakeholders. She's led the National P3 Institute since 2008 and has been and currently is an expert advisor to Connecticut's pre-K to 3 leadership program, and she's been with us since the inception. We welcome, albeit virtually, Kristie and Gracie to Connecticut.
Great, thank you so much, Rosie and Andrea and the rest of the Connecticut team. It's a delight to be here with you, and it's always great to share time together with Gracie. It's the partnership between the National P3 Center and NAESP is definitely one of the highlights of my career. So it's great, Gracie, to be with you as always. So here's what we're planning to do for the next 50 minutes now. We are through the first bullet point, the introductions. We're going to contextualize this pre-K through third grade movement a bit in the current context. Then we'll do a nice overview of the brand new 2021 guide. We're going to get to hear from a very important and specific program inside Connecticut that is helping administrators to become stronger leaders in P3. We'll have a few announcements from OEC, and then we'll do wrap up and thank yous. Okay, so let's just start quickly with some context. Many of us have been involved in P3 or the pre-K through third grade space for decades now. And I also want to lean into that this age range is of an even greater importance now. What we know throughout the pandemic is that there were many disruptions to children's learning settings, whether it be the location of the setting or the adult who is helping to facilitate the setting or the access and availability to learning at all. The other thing we know is that these early grades are especially consequential and have been especially consequential during the pandemic for a couple of reasons that we're actually going to explore when we talk about the guide, is that young children rely on facilitation and support and engagement with adults more than older children. And so these disruptions to learning settings have been particularly important and consequential to the early grades. We also know that school leadership has been really stretched, and I want to quickly acknowledge, given how many school leaders we have on the call, the Herculean effort you all have put forth this past academic year, and especially looking into next year, to really pivot, to figure out how best to do distance learning, how best to support the rich diversity of children and families, their home contexts, their digital contexts, their employment circumstances, to really provide thoughtful and meaningful engagement for our youngest learners. And it's really these two factors that, as I said, were important before child development and school leadership, we think are even more important now. And they have actually been the underlying foundation to NAESP's work and the update of the guide. So we are delighted to have partnered with NAESP. The guide has actually been, a version of the guide has been out and available in the field since the mid-2000s. It was last updated in 2014. We were delighted to partner with NAESP to author this 2021 updated version. This is a snapshot of the cover. I do want to quickly start by acknowledging who the guide is devoted to. We have dedicated the guide to Ruby Takanishi. Interestingly enough, she actually was one of the founders of this work back in the mid-2000s. She provided vision and funding. She was the president of the Foundation for Child Development for nearly 14 years. She provided funding to NAESP. She provided funding to the National P3 Center to really begin to lift up the importance of this continuum. Sadly, Ruby passed away this past August, and so we're thrilled to have been able to dedicate this guide to her legacy and her vision. All right.
Could I just add, there's one thing.
Of course.
I know you knew Dr. Takanishi personally, and I've learned a lot about her just from listening to you and doing some more reading about her life. But I love that one of the things she said is that talent may be equally distributed in the population, but opportunity is not. And she was just a warrior for children, and it's so great, and I'm honored that we were able to dedicate our new guide in her memory.
Great. Thank you, Gracie. And Gracie and I are going to be doing a little bit of this serve and return of presenting the guide itself. So Gracie, I'll start with this slide just talking about what we did in the redevelopment. The next slide talks about the components of the guide, and I'll let you lead that one. So I don't want to spend too much time here, although I do think it's really important to emphasize what we and my research team at the National P3 Center did in updating this guide. One of the most important things we did was a really deep literature review. In particular, to dig into the research, case studies, and field-based learnings that have come about since 2014. This field is changing rapidly, and so we did want to make sure that the guide was fully inclusive and representative of current research. We also held a number of interviews with experts in the field, wanting to be sure that we were covering the highlights of what's happening in the practice field, in addition to the research world. So wanting to make sure that we were leveraging those school districts, elementary schools, and communities that are really seen as leaders in this space. As has been done in the past, we also worked with a panel of NAESP members. One from each of the NAESP regions was representative. They helped to guide the structure of the report, and also then provided feedback as we were writing and developing it. Quick note, we did an alignment with the PEACEL standards, wanting to ensure that we were sticking to the roles and responsibilities and expectations of school administrators. You will find throughout the guide a number of spotlights, which is where we talk about an actual elementary school and an actual principal and paint a brief vignette of the kinds of work they are doing that reflect this pre-K through third grade continuum. That was one of the best parts of this for me, is getting to interview and talk with principals across the country doing the work. And then finally, before the guide was finalized, we did send it out for peer review just to make sure we were staying true to all of our intentions. I share all of that just to really emphasize how solidly grounded the information and the strategies are that are in the guide.
So let's talk a little bit about the guide components. It begins with setting a firm foundation for the importance of leading pre-K through third grade. I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about the guide. It's not that you can't use it with early childhood educators or teachers, but it really is specifically written through the lens of leadership and leading the work, which I think makes it very easy for principals to use for their work in their buildings. It also has a very strong commitment to making sure that principals have a firm knowledge about child development and early learning. It's kind of like a primer. You know, we hear a lot in the field that a lot of times principals do not go through an early childhood education program or have their degree in early childhood, and then they're asked to move to that level to be a principal, going from middle school to the elementary level. I've even heard of people at the secondary level being asked to go down to the elementary level. So it's a strong component in the book to give that firm foundation in those best practices and what principals really need to know about child development. There are 6 competencies to the book. Each competency has 4 strategies that accompany the competency, and each competency also has a reflective assessment that people can work through to see from the very beginning, you know, what are your strengths in this competency and what are your weaknesses? What do you need to focus on? As Kristie mentioned, we have some great spotlights included in the work. I always am drawn to that practical piece. What are principals in the field? How are they doing this competency in their buildings? So we really have some strong examples for the work of the principal in the competency. There's also a great list of resources that accompanies each competency, as well as a great reference guide and appendices. I know that when I was working on my doctorate, I was always looking for those great citations and resources that I could be using in my work. So I think this will be really, really helpful to the field. It looks like Kristie isn't able to hear anything at this time. We might just give her a minute to see if she can go out or make an adjustment. But one thing that you probably won't hear Kristie say, so I'm going to say it, is that P3 Center just did an outstanding job of writing for the guide. It is just a really good read. It's, I always am drawn toward really good writing, and NAESP was just very fortunate and lucky that the P3 Center was there to help us update and revise the research in our guide. I'm happy to go on. We'll talk about the competencies. So if we had a slide up about competency 1 is understanding child development and its implications for high quality instruction and interactions pre-K through 3rd grade. And in this guide, we were really intentional on using the pre-K through 3rd grade lingo. I know that a lot of times, and even in our NAESP Leadership Academy, we use P3, and that's been trademarked for us, but sometimes there is a little confusion there with 3-year-olds. So we wanted to be very intentional, really talk about that continuum pre-K through 3rd grade. And in this competency, we really wanted to give a firm foundation, like I said, about deepening knowledge and staying current and research on child development, especially social emotional learning and cognitive or executive functions, like cognitive abilities that are needed to control our thoughts, our emotions, and actions. We also emphasized in this competency the developmental perspective that you need to use in building relationships that support classroom interactions, and overall interactions in a school community, which includes your teachers, your staff, and families. Making sure that children are in learning environments that truly promote student engagement, choice, and voice, and that principals understand the implications of child development for student experiences, and especially those transitions as they move from grade level to grade level, ensuring that each year builds on the successes of the previous year. So if we were going on to the next competency, competency 2 talks about developing and fostering partnerships with families and the community. And this means being very intentional about your work with families, having mutual respect and a desire to partner in the learning process. Of course, you want to focus on all of your families, but especially on those that have been marginalized. Your school community exists outside the four walls of your school. And this is a big focus of this competency, is to recognize and seek to build collaboration and relationships of mutual benefit with other early childhood programs like Head Start, private pre-Ks that might surround your school or in your district, because it really takes, we know it really takes the village, and having those relationships in place, knowing what community resources are out there, only helps to serve your school in a better way. We talk about providing quality pre-K or kindergarten programs for families is just the beginning, and that there needs to be a smooth transition and quality learning experiences throughout the continuum. And especially living in a time with COVID, where certain families may have a myriad of needs and require extra supports, it really is important that schools establish strong connections with communities and services to provide the best resources for their school families. So we're at competency 3. I was going to stop and see if Kristie's back with us. She wanted to pick that up. We're at competency 3.
Gracie, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
So now I have sound, but now I'm unable to share my slides again.
I have just been talking about them, Kristie.
Okay.
So if you want to pick up with competency 3, then I'll just chip in on some examples.
You bet. So competency 3 is about embracing and enacting a pre-K through 3rd grade vision. We added a very important action word when we revised this competency, which is about enacting a pre-K through 3rd grade vision, because what we know is that it's more than just a belief system that early learning and the early grades matter, but that there actually needs to be evidence of those priorities and values in terms of a school-wide culture that is inclusive of pre-K as a key part of the school's mission and of student success, but not just the pre-K that is co-located at the elementary school, also embracing the importance of all of those other areas of and programs in which children have learning opportunities prior or preschool. Also part of enacting a pre-K through 3rd grade vision is that magic word of alignment, is striving to create the kinds of alignment and coherence that matter across the grade levels, pre-K, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And much of that alignment is going to echo back to the very first competency, which is about really reflecting child development. So is instruction, our standards, our learning environments following a developmental trajectory of what we know is best for young children? And then finally, another part of the enacting a pre-K through 3rd grade vision is really taking a meaningful effort to streamline and align the policies, programs, and initiatives that go on inside the school, so that as a whole, the school is presenting a united mission statement and front for having prioritized pre-K through third grade.
And an example that I might give, Kristie, just for my days as being a principal, we did a great job at the end of the year with pre-K, trying to give them an orientation into kindergarten, where they could go visit kindergarten with their teacher. They could spend some time there. They ate lunch in the cafeteria. But then we started thinking, why aren't we doing that pre-K through fifth grade? So that led to having a step-up day at the end of the year where every grade level stepped up to the next grade level and was able to go hear from kids in that grade level. And, to me, that's a great example of that. You have that great quality anchor in pre-K and K, but you continue that continuum moving on through your school.
I apologize for the gremlins that seem to have taken over technology for me. I lost my sound, I lost my screen sharing, everything just scrolled through. Moving on to competency 4 now, which is actually one that I am very proud of. This was a brand new competency in the update, which is focusing on ensuring equitable opportunities. I think equity has become a common value and certainly a common mantra, but we really try to operationalize that it's more than just a tagline that we are providing equitable opportunities for all children. But we tease that apart within the strategies and lean into what equitable approaches would include, starting at the individual level of ensuring that the school administrator is developing the critical self-awareness and knowledge of the different systemic oppressions that exist, as well as not just cultural competence, but culturally sustaining practices. We then move into ensuring that the climate of the entire school is open and inclusive of a vast kinds of diversities, not just racial and ethnic, but also thinking about children with special needs, thinking about dual and multi-language learners, thinking about the diversities of family structures, not only of the students, but also of the full school staff and teachers. In addition, we also talk about the need to use data and key stakeholder feedback to really identify the disproportionalities and disparities that exist within the school's community, whether it be early expulsion and suspension, or whether it be who's accessing certain services, but that there is an intentional data-driven effort to understand who's gaining and who's missing out on different opportunities. And then the fourth sort of tier or strategy in these equity strategies is to then think about differentiating resources based on those deep data dives. Having the knowledge that inequities exist is one thing, again, acting upon those and trying to mitigate them is the next. And so the fourth strategy is about differentiating both the quantity and the timing of different resources made available to children and families.
And Kristie, I would just add that even though we now have a competency that really is devoted to equity, I think you all did an amazing job of weaving the equity lens throughout the publication, just like principal leaders are going to see more of the SEL piece woven throughout the guide as well. So I really appreciate that.
Moving into the fifth competency is really thinking about sharing leadership and building professional capacity. While we have clearly highlighted the role of the administrator throughout this guide, that the principal and the assistant principal, school board members and others are important leaders of this work, they cannot do it alone. And so there really needs to be an effort to distribute leadership. And so the strategies include thinking about sharing leadership for these P3 or pre-K through third grade approaches with teachers, in particular, those pre-K through third grade teachers, as being really important knowledge holders and mentors for others across the school community. We recognize that an additional strategy is around the professional learning provided to the adults in the system. Is that as much as we want good things happening for children, there has to be a parallel process happening for the adults, which is continuing to support and encourage their own growth in understanding child development and understanding the best pedagogical approaches that support teaching and learning and early learning in the early grades, and understanding effective ways to engage families. And that as adults, one and done workshops are not enough, that it has to be sustained and ongoing. Embedded in this competency is also a greater attention to understanding how and who to hire to staff these early grades. And so really thinking about who are the teachers, what kinds of professional preparation do they have, what kinds of training do they have, and really embracing hiring and then placing the most effective teachers in these early grades. We actually know from research that at a global level, the most effective teachers tend to be placed in third grade and above, because those are the high stakes grades. And what we're really trying to do is turn that equation on its head and say the most effective teachers really need to be with these young grades, given what we know about the foundational skills and knowledge that children are building. And then finally, this is one that's also really important to me, and I think that has become even more important during the pandemic, is we can't think about distributed leadership or teacher teamwork if we're not also really thinking about the health and well-being of teachers and staff. If we're not taking care of their own needs to be balanced and engaged with their own well-being, having a stability in their own home life, then they're not going to be effective when they show up at school. So we really take a holistic picture of teachers and staff inside school buildings within this competency.
And I would just add that one thing I really like about the language of this competency is I think it really aligns well with the work that you're doing in your professional learning communities. I also think that sharing and distributing leadership can be really hard, especially for principals that are new to the profession. So it's great to have some strategies to know how to make that work. And then just supporting the idea when we talk about getting the best teachers in the right seats on the bus at our school, that those quality learning experiences for young children are directly related to those quality teachers and the principals that they interact with. Research shows us this. So it's very, very important.
Thank you, Gracie. And then the sixth competency is about promoting a culture of continuous improvement. And we also feel really proud of this competency because it extends beyond just an obsession or a devotion to thinking about student scores, student assessment scores, but to be thinking about sort of the different data sources and the different strategies we have that inform us how well we're doing and where we might have areas to improve. So we do keep in a clear understanding that student assessment is important. What I often say is if we don't assess every individual child, how on earth can we support every individual child along their own learning trajectories? And so student assessment is absolutely essential, but we need to better understand the appropriate uses of assessment for these kiddos. Again, I think we've learned so much about this during the pandemic. It was hard enough to do screening and assessments with wiggly 5-year-olds when they're sitting right next to you. Try and do it in a virtual setting and it becomes even more challenging. But I do hope that we've become even more aware of the importance of using assessment in meaningful ways during these early learning and early grades. In addition, beyond student assessment data, really leaning into relying on multiple sources of data to inform improvement. That we're looking at, and also not just data about how kids are doing, but are we evaluating teacher satisfaction with the professional development they're receiving? Are we understanding how families are feeling engaged and reached out to? So are we thinking about these multiple sources of data to inform improvement efforts? And once we have those data sources, then the last two strategies are really about an inclusive community who openly, honestly, and trustingly can deliberate about the strengths and weaknesses that are seen to build improvement efforts. And that collaborative inquiry needs to happen within school walls with teachers, staff, and other key stakeholders, but then also engaging families and other community partners to be thinking about ways to strengthen the school culture, the school climate, and the instruction going on inside.
And again, I feel that the language of this competency really supports the work in your professional learning communities. And I always would see the older grades, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, they would be doing student-led conferencing, for example. And I thought, we can do that in kindergarten. We can absolutely do that in kindergarten. They have a great portfolio of work to share with parents. And I just extended my conference time from 15 to 20 minutes, 10 minutes, where that student was showcasing their work with their parents, and then let them go do an activity where I had that time to be with their parents. So I think these competencies very much give encouragement for you to try some new strategies and maybe think about early childhood in maybe a different way, and examining your practice holistically, just like we're looking at the whole child.
Thank you, Gracie. Just a couple more pieces on this, the guide itself. And I know Gracie mentioned this at the beginning, is that one of the important parts that we kept is this notion of reflective assignment. We're really proud of the book, the guide itself. But what we don't intend for it to do is to become dusty and sit on the shelf as an interesting resource to pull out now and again to refer to. But we really want it to be an action-driven tool where we can be thinking about and reflecting on our own efforts. And so this is just a snapshot of what the reflective assessment looks like. There is an assessment for each of the competencies that are specifically tied back to the strategies. It's not a grading system, but it's really helping to think about where you're strong and where you might want to then dig deeper. Did you want to say anything more about that, Gracie?
No, I think you did a great job, Kristie.
Great. So before we start addressing questions, what we'd like to do now is turn it over to our friend and colleague, Karen List, who's going to talk a little bit about a Connecticut-specific strategy to enact some of this work.
Well, hello, and thank you, Kristie, and thank you, Gracie, for that great presentation. I have to say, Kristie's been a partner with us since, well, actually 2010, when a group of us started learning from her about the importance of the pre-K 3 continuum. I'm happy to see so many friends and former graduates of the pre-K 3 program on this webinar. We have worked with 85 leaders across the state, And we started the program in 2015. I was fortunate as I was retiring as superintendent from the West Hartford Public Schools to be asked by Casey Cobb, the University of Connecticut, to develop a leadership program. And part of what we did was we created an incredible group of expert panelists, Kristie being one of them, who advised us. Other people were Elizabeth Aschenbrenner. Many of you may know her. She does a lot of work with play-based learning in our state. Lisa Roy, who's from the Buffett Institute. Sharon Ritchie, who was the editor of First School and worked with the Porter Graham Center in North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We also have Wendy Simmons as a member of our expert panel, and Steve Tozer, a great leadership person from the University of Chicago. And Andrea is a great partner in this work. So the Office of Early Childhood, Connecticut State Department of Education have all supported the work that we've done. Our program is an executive style leadership program. It operates over a 10-month period. We run 3 modules. One module is curriculum and instruction, and our instructor for that is Kerry Jones, who's Director of Elementary Education in West Hartford Public Schools. We bring practicing practitioners to instruct the program, and then we bring in the experts to provide the research and the theory for the program. Our second module is assessment and evaluation. We are proud to have Noam Stern, from an elementary principal from Avon, who is our instructor for that program. And then our third module is Leading for Equity, Excellence, and Early Success. And Maureen Lantner, who is a leadership consultant, is our instructor for that program. We're looking forward to welcoming 20 new cohort members this July when we open the program again. The program is currently full, and we have quite a waiting list for the program. Some of that is because of the support we've gotten from the Office of Early Childhood through the professional development grants. They've been able to offset the tuition to a great extent. But our focus is really on developing strong leaders who understand how important it is to align learning from pre-K to grade 3, both horizontally and vertically. So I'm going to ask to change the slide. And I just wanted you to have an opportunity to see how we define leadership in our program. We continue to evolve. We continue to look at best practices. We use the earlier version of the NAESP guide when we started our program in 2015. Now we're excited to incorporate the new guide into our program, which we will. The program also involves visiting some schools and seeing early learning in action. But I think probably the most important thing, and the reason I had the prior photograph up, is the connections that are made among the cohort members. The photograph that you saw was our most recent cohort, and we spend a lot of time allowing people to work together, talk about what's important to them. We run the gamut of anyone from teachers to assistant principals, directors of special ed, principals, assistant superintendents, and many of our graduates have gone on to be in leadership positions beyond where they were. For an example, an assistant principal becoming a principal. Some of our graduates are now superintendents. So we've built quite a great cadre of people in our state that help to develop and expand the work that we do. So my last slide, if we could just advance it, is just a way to learn more about the program. Our website is there, and if you want to reach out to me, you can. But feel fortunate to be among such leaders nationally like Gracie and Kristie, and proud to share the work that we're doing with the University of Connecticut to promote leadership of pre-K 3. So thank you very much. I think our next person should be Michelle Levy.
Thank you, Karen. The OEC has been really proud to be a supporter of the pre-K 3 leadership program and looks forward to continuing that partnership. I'm really glad to have been invited to be a part of this group, the rollout of this updated resource. Both Grace and Kristie mentioned the importance of partnering and aligning our efforts across community and school-based programs. And the Office of Early Childhood funds both preschool programs in public schools, but also supports a lot of family childcare programs and community-based childcare centers. So I consider, you know, those points especially relevant to the work and the partnership between OEC and SDE, as well as with CAS and the Yukon Leadership Program. We work at the state level to think about how we can align and create this continuum of supports with things such as aligned standards. But you really make it come alive, those partnerships and that continuum at the local level. So we look forward to continuing to partner with everyone here around really using that guide and really making it come alive and bringing those competencies to light. Thank you. And I believe Irene is perhaps going to close us out.
Unless Rosie, do you want to share now about the giveaway or should we wait? And the survey?
I'm ready to go. And then I'll turn it over to you. That sounds good.
Thank
So
you.
I just want to say on behalf of all of us at CAS, I want to thank Kristie and Gracie and Karen and Andrea and Michelle and Irene, all of you for being here today and sharing your expertise with us. There's so much to think about, especially for each of these 6 competencies, if we're going to implement them with fidelity, reliability, and validity across all pre-K through grade 3 programs, classrooms, and schools. So during this webinar, we've only begun to scratch the surface, and I'd like to suggest and encourage principals and other school leaders to think about future professional learning opportunities that you would like to be actively engaged in and or part of either during the summer and or the coming school year. Whether it's book clubs, more webinars, an opportunity to take a deep dive into one or more of these competencies, and perhaps even to visit exemplary early childhood programs in Connecticut, we want to hear from you so that we can best meet your learning needs. So to that end, we have created a short, very short, less than 3 minutes that we would like you to complete a survey for us. I'll drop the link of the survey into the chat. So please, before you get up from your computer, because otherwise it won't happen, but before you get up from your computer, just take a couple minutes to respond to our multiple choice questions and let us know how we can best keep the momentum for continuing to learn together from this webinar going. So the survey again, the link will be dropped into the chat. And while that's happening, I'd also like to once again encourage anyone who's not a member of NAESP to take a look at the website and to join and become an active member of NAESP. There's so many great resources and opportunities to learn with and from other elementary and middle level principals. So be sure to check out www.naesp.org. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to once again thank NAESP for their generous donation of 3 copies of the book, Leading Learning Communities, A Principal's Guide to Early Learning and the Early Grades Pre-K through Grade 3. And I'd also like to say, I know Dr. Earl Franks, I was hoping he would be here so I could thank him for joining us today. He just happens to be the executive director for NAESP. And so we greatly, Gracie, you can tell him, we greatly appreciate him being here today, at least for the half hour that he was able to attend. But he did drop a note into the chat saying that, and I want to just reiterate it, for anyone who's interested, if you don't get the book today and you don't want to wait to read what's in the book, you can actually go out to NAESP's website and download the executive summary for free and go ahead and get started on reading about the competencies. So again, thank him for being here with us. And it's now time for me to pick 3 winners for the books. And the way that we did this, you can see my bowl right here, and you can see that I have everybody's name and their email address in here. And I'm going to pick out 3 names. I'll probably butcher your names, and I'm sorry, but I will do my best to say them the best I can. I just know it's my Oregon accent now in Connecticut. I have a hard time with names. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, we will be sending you an email and you can let us know how best to send you the book if you are the lucky winner. So just because I can't read them and do it at the same time, the first person is the book is going to go to Karen Weiskell from Cromwell. So cromwell.k12.ct.us, Karen Weiskell. Next person, I'm picking one out. It's easier to do it that way. Goes to Jill Mazzalupo from Montville School, schools.org. And the third book is going to go to Lisa Daly from WHPS.org. I'm not quite sure which school that is, but Lisa and Karen and Jill, we will be in contact with you. Congratulations on being one of our selected winners for the books. And again, thank you to NAESP for donating the books for our raffle today. And anyone wishing to get a copy of the book, you can purchase it from NAESP's website, or if you want it even faster, what I'm finding is that Amazon, if you've got Prime, you'll get it in 1 or 2 days or whatever. So either way, you can pick up a copy of the book or read the executive summary if you go down and download it for free on the website at NAESP. Again, I'd like to encourage you to complete the survey before you leave your computer so you don't forget, because we will be using that information to plan additional professional learning opportunities that best meet your needs as well as the needs of other Connecticut educators. And finally, I'd like to thank Kristie, Gracie, Karen, Andrea, Michelle, and Irene for sharing your expertise with us today and for being here. I'd also like to thank all of you for joining us. And it's now my pleasure to turn this back over to Irene, Chief Academic Officer for the Connecticut State Department of Education. Irene, take it away.
Unfortunately, Irene just sent me a message saying she just got kicked off the webinar. So I do think we have gremlins. On behalf of the State Department of Education and Irene, who again is the Chief Academic Officer at the Department of Education, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. We really appreciate you spending the time with us this afternoon. We hope that you all download the executive summary and purchase the book, and keep your ears tuned for some collaborative professional learning opportunities with SDE and CAS as we continue our conversations about pre-K to grade 3 leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.